already been introduced. My name is Nasif Semwanga, and I'm a lecturer at IUIU, and I do lecture research. I teach nursing students research, and I'm here to be presenting to you qualitative data analysis using the manual approach. So I wanted us to first remind ourselves what we understand by qualitative and quantitative research. We know that we have many approaches to research, and for this particular session, we shall be focusing on the qualitative approach. So, many of us might be well versed with a quantitative aspect where we are dealing with numeric data that is looking at drawing conclusions and identifying patterns within that data. And we are basically looking at making generalization of our findings to the general population. However, unlike the quantitative aspect, with the qualitative aspect, we are going to be dealing with those concepts. In this case, we shall be calling them phenomena that cannot be quantified or that you cannot investigate in the statistical approach. So we shall be looking at things like human behavior, experiences, and different things like attitude that you cannot quantify. So basically, qualitative research is focusing on gaining a deep understanding and in-depth understanding of what kind of meaning people ascribe to such kind of phenomena, like behavior. What are the different characteristics of behavior? How do people perceive different experiences and things like that? So you find that some of these concepts cannot be quantified. So basically, this qualitative aspect is looking at exploring and going into deep to understand what kind of meaning collection and analysis tool. So you're not only in the perspective of the researcher, but your insights and also your skills are also going to be transferred into the perspective of a data collection tool and the analysis tool. So as we proceed in this presentation, you'll find a few things that might be similar in both approaches, but how we do them might differ a little bit or slightly. So can we go to the next slide? Can we go to the next slide? Thank you so much. Are we still together?
Yes.
Yes, we are, Mr.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much. So, well, let's now focus on our topic for today, which is basically going to be looking at how we can analyze qualitative research data. So we've seen that with qualitative research, we are going to be developing data that is not in the statistical form, or which is non-number data. So we have different approaches to qualitative research, and using those different approaches and methods, we can be able to derive this kind of data. So we can use methods like interviews, and interviews, basically this refers to conversations between like one or two people, between two or three or more people, whereby you have an interviewer who is asking questions and a respondent who is answering the question. So they will be basically telling you, and it's more of words. So we shall be having text or audio as our data in that perspective. So we have what we call focus group discussions. So for focus group discussions, basically bringing about 4, 5, or 6 people together. It can go to up to around 12 people together to discuss a specific concept. But what makes them focused, it's because we have like a tool, we have a focus group discussion guide that is going to help us keep these participants focused on the aim or the main objective of that discussion. So me as the researcher, I'm only there to kind of moderate and direct the conversation. So basically we are also dealing with audio or voices. So we can record these kind of discussions and interviews and come up with audio or audio transcripts. We can come up with text. We can come up with words or written narratives. So there are so many methods that we can use to collect qualitative data. But what I'm trying to bring out is that when we do qualitative data, we are basically generating non-numeric data. So this is data that is not in form of numbers. So it is data that is in form of like words, audio, images, notes, things like journals, and things like that. And more often that you'll find that you as a researcher, in the perspective of a data collection tool, you will use your senses, you will use your eyes to see the nonverbal communication. So you'll have to note the gestures, the expression, facial expressions, and things like that. So use all your body senses to collect this kind of data. You'll use your ears to hear what people are telling you. You will use your sense of smell, your sense of taste and touch to generate some of this kind of data. But the question still remains, given that this is not numbered data, how can we analyze it? So we are going to see this in the forthcoming slides. Let's go to the next slide. Next slide, please. Thank you so much. So when it comes to qualitative data, it tends to be a bit tricky. So it tends to be a little bit tricky when it comes to the analysis part. So you find that there are so many technicalities, and if you do not know the systematic approach, it can be very daunting and very challenging. So when it comes to qualitative data, we want to convert this written text into the findings. But many a times we ask ourselves, we have a lot of data. We have a lot of transcripts, very long transcripts. How am I going to convert this into findings? So there are so many questions around there. People end up doing very superficial analysis whereby they just go ahead and find out things that they feel that are interesting to them, and they'll just report onto that. But actually, this type of analysis takes up a very specific and a very it's a systematic approach. So there are different steps that you can actually go through to help you make this whole entire process very easy for you. And so as to make it very rigorous, and so that people can be able to trust the findings of your study. Yes, please. Okay, so we are saying we have a very systematic and systematic approach. And how do we go about this? We're going to see this in the next presentation. But basically, the process that we are going to be using, or the type of analysis that we are going to be using, should be predefined in your protocol. So your study design is actually going to inform how you're going to do your qualitative data analysis. For example, the kind of questions or research questions that you have will determine how you're going to go about your data analysis, because we have different approaches to qualitative data analysis. So that you have to predetermine this during the development of your protocol. So that means that it is very important to be very thorough and very transparent when developing our protocols, so that we don't have challenges when it comes to the step of qualitative data analysis. So we are saying that this process is very iterative. This means that it is a back and forth kind of process. So we have different stages, that 1, 2, 3, 4, up to maybe 9. But you can always go back to step 5. If maybe things are a bit unclear, go back to step 4. You can go back to step 1, or even going back to the second step of reading your transcripts. So it is a back and forth process whereby we really want to make sure we analyze this data in depth, so that we can really identify those key patterns or those key relationships within this data that can help us answer our research question. So it is very iterative. And along the way, you will find that you might need to get insights from different people to kind of guide you on how well to go about this process, and also to try and verify and make your analysis clearer. So it is a very iterative kind of process. So basically, this process is in this kind of a systematic approach to help us have a clear flow of the process, and also to help us really understand the phenomenon we are trying to study. So we shall try and see how best we can simplify it with the next slides. But we need to keep at the back of our minds that it is a very systematic process that involves stages that we need to go through each at a time. So secondly, I'm saying that it is a very highly interpretive process. So it is very high, it is highly interpretive. So basically, this means that it will involve us to really understand and explain the meaning of these different segments of text that we are going to be looking at in the data. So you need to use your view as a researcher. Use the literature you have read and the opinions that you can get from different sources to try and explain this kind of text that we are going to be looking at in the next slides. So let's dive into the thematic analysis now. We can go to the next slide. So there are different approaches to qualitative data analysis. We have thematic analysis, narrative analysis, grounded theory. We have discourse analysis, content analysis. We have heuristic analysis. There are very many approaches to qualitative data analysis. But like I said before, the type of analysis is predetermined. It is predetermined in your protocol development. So it is the kind of study that you have that will determine which type of qualitative analysis that I'm going to be doing. For example, if you're taking stories from people, that is narrative inquiry, you'll need to use the narrative analysis. You understand? So the kind of study that you have will inform what type of analysis that you're going to be using. But many at times we find that the thematic analysis, it's like a foundation for all the other types of analysis because it has the key steps that you will always follow when you're doing the thematic or analysis of qualitative data. So in this particular presentation, we are going to be focusing on the thematic analysis. And basically, this refers to identifying and analyzing or reporting patterns within data. So you'll be identifying different pieces of data within your text, and you see how these link to give you a big picture or what you're going to be calling a theme that can really explain your phenomenon that you're trying to study or your concept that you're trying to study. Are we still together?
Yes.
Thank you so much. So, yes, so just like in this brief illustration here in the thematic analysis box, which shows that you have qualitative data, so it will be transformed in different stages where we shall be coding it until the point of where we can be identifying themes from that data, or those key statements from that data. So let's dive into the thematic analysis now. Next presentation, please. Next slide. Thank you so much. So basically, like you hear the term thematic analysis. Thematic analysis, basically, it's going to be looking at us identifying themes. And a theme basically refers to something that is occurring multiple times within your data. For example, you might be having, maybe you conducted focus group discussions. You had discussions, maybe, sorry, I'm really very passionate about midwives, so I'll be referring to midwives a lot. I'm very passionate about maternal and child health issues, so I'll be referring to midwives a lot. So assuming you might have conducted focus group discussions with midwives, and then along the way, you went ahead to also conduct key informant interviews with maybe their managers or the administrators. You understand? So you might have those key things that are really emerging. You're really identifying certain portions information that are really coming up in both the focus group discussions and also the key informant interviews. So, for example, it might be a problem with maybe referral services. So midwives within their discussion or focus group discussions are really talking about issues regarding referral of mothers to higher standards of care. And also the managers are also talking about the same thing. Maybe they're having challenges on referring mothers. So this becomes something that is really very common in all the different discussions or interviews that you're having. And along the way, we can integrate them into something comprehensive that we're going to be calling a theme. So basically, thematic analysis is us identifying those different segments of data or those significant statements within your transcripts or your data that can be able to help us answer your research question. So that is what we're going to be looking at. Like I've already explained, it is really a systematic process and it has different stages. on going back to your data to identify new themes or to identify new things that are coming up in your data, identify new patterns, identify new meanings or new relationships within your data. So it's a back and forth kind of process, just like research. So you're always moving back and forth to try and make sure that you really have a rigorous process that is going to produce something that is really trustworthy or that is rigorous. Okay, so we are saying that thematic analysis, many people find it very challenging, often because when you do a qualitative study, you produce really a large volume of data. Wow. Take, for instance, an interview of 1 hour. So if you did a key informant interview, maybe with someone for 1 hour, it can take you close to 8 to 10 hours when you're transcribing or converting that audio into text. So you will have pages and pages and pages of your text or transcript. So usually with qualitative data, and this is one of the beauties of qualitative data, is that you really produce a lot of data. It's really in depth and very deep. So it has so many things. You have the transcripts, you have the observations that you made for the non-verbal communication, you have the field notes, you have all those different things that you captured during the interview. So usually what makes it very challenging when people do qualitative data and when they do qualitative research and they get all these volumes of data, they find it really very challenging. So, and that's why many people usually run away from qualitative research, but don't get scared. Anyone can actually do qualitative research and anyone can do thematic analysis. So there are so many ways of skinning a goat. So, I mean, you can always do things differently and always achieve the same goal. So it might seem very very huge, but there are different ways of how we can actually do it, very systematic ways, and we make the process a bit easier and more interesting. For example, there are some softwares that can actually help you when you're coding your data, when you're transcribing your data. There are some softwares that can actually help you. But many times we find that these softwares are really costly because you have to buy the license. And many times you find that you really have to get some bit of advanced training in these softwares so as to be able to conduct a very good and thorough thematic analysis or qualitative data analysis. However, we can as well use the manual approach. So it is what really is convenient for you and what is feasible for you. So in this case, we are going to be focusing on the manual approach of conducting a thematic analysis. So we can go to the next slide. Next slide, please. Thank you so much. So I put an illustration of the different steps that you can actually go through when you're doing a thematic analysis. But for this particular presentation, I want us to be a bit more hands-on. So we're going to practice some of these things. For example, coding. I want us to try and practice some bit of coding in this session. Hopefully, by the end of the day, someone can be able to go back and they are confident that they can actually do coding. So I know we are all at different stages of research development or research projects. Some people might be at proposal development, others are maybe writing their manuscript, others are maybe doing a data analysis and they need guidance on that. Others have interest in this kind of qualitative data analysis, but I feel like we can all pick something from today's presentation. So I want us to make it a bit more hands-on. For example, if you look at these steps, majority of the things or majority of the tasks that are in each step are more of hands-on or practical kind of things. So we are saying that we're going to be using the manual approach. So we shall not be using any software here besides maybe having a laptop if you have one. And even if when you do not have a laptop, you can still do a qualitative thematic analysis. So if you have a laptop, we shall be using Microsoft Word, and that's sufficient enough for us to do the thematic analysis. So in the first stage, we are saying that we are going to be organizing our data sets. What do we mean by organizing data sets? Basically, when we talk about organizing the data set, it's more of helping us to easily identify the data and also to try and help us in sorting this data and also to store this data. For example, if you have maybe transcripts, how are you going to label these transcripts? Make sure at least you indicate the venue where this interview took place, indicate the date, the time, who was the interviewer. Like, try to put in some details so that you cannot be able to get lost in your data. So try to get a clear system on how you can label, sort, and organize your data. So usually we prefer putting them into folders. If it is on a computer, put them in folders. Put the focus group discussions alone. Put the key informant interviews alone. Put the images alone. Put the journals alone. Put the field notes alone, and try to label them. Label each and every piece of data so that you can be able to refer to it easily, and you should not, and so that to avoid you getting lost within your data. Secondly, after you organizing your data very well, I'm assuming you're done with your data or your data collection, and you have all this chunk of maybe audio recordings. We have maybe audio recordings. You had an interview, maybe a key informant interview or a focus group discussion with maybe people, and you audio recorded those discussions. So you have these audio files. How do you go about them? How do you analyze them to the level of writing up your findings? So we said the first step is organizing that data. And then secondly, the second step is more about converting now the audio into the text. The process we're going to be calling transcribing. So basically, transcribing is converting that audio text into, that audio verbatim into text. So how do we go about this? It is really a very critical step, because if you make an error here, it will affect the entire step going forward. So you will end up with really biased findings. So that's why it is very good to dedicate ample time to the transcribing. You need to really give it enough time, because it is really a very tedious process, which requires a lot of attention, a lot of being very, 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 very keen when you're doing the transcribing. So for example, sometimes we collect data which is in different languages. Maybe you collected your data and it is in your local language. Presumably, let me say I'm a Muganda and my language is Luganda. So I collected my data in Luganda. So how do you go about the transcribing of that data? So first of all, you need to transcribe it in the original language. If it is Luganda, transcribe it in Luganda. And then afterwards, you can do that, what we call translation. Translation is converting from one language to another. So you can convert it from Luganda text to English, or a more comfortable language that you're more familiar with. So first transcribe it in the local language, and then you can translate it to English. If your transcripts were already, if your conversations or data collection was already in English, then you can transcribe in English. But this is a very critical step whereby you really need to confirm the accuracy of these transcripts. And usually this is supposed to be done by another person. Have a fresh pair of eyes to look at your transcript and to try and compare the audio and the text that you have written, you get, so that you make sure that you really have an accurate representation of your audio. So it is a very critical step in analysis, and it really takes a lot of time. So you really need to dedicate enough time to that transcribing. I would really advise that each time you complete a step, take at least 1 day of rest to really avoid mental fatigue, and also try to come back with a really fresh mind to continue with the next step. So the third step is familiarizing yourself with the data set. So basically, this refers to us really interacting with our data more often, to a point whereby you really understand your data from zero to the end. To try to immerse yourself in that data, to try and really make sure that you understand your data very well. And this comes by us reading and rereading those transcripts that we have generated from the audio. So read and reread those transcripts as many times as you can. And that's why it is usually very important or very good to do the transcribing yourself, so So immediately after the discussion or the interview, transcribe that interview or the discussion immediately. So transcribe it yourself. The more you do this yourself, to help you really appreciate your data well, appreciate the context well. You really get to know the stop and the end of your data. So it is a very good step because it helps us in coding. It helps us, simplifies the coding process because you already know what is in your data. So you know where to find what and how to find it. And then from familiarizing yourself with the data, that can come with reading and rereading and also transcribing this data by yourself. You can then get to the other part of coding. Please don't confuse this coding with the coding of IT, where they generate softwares and things like that. So our coding in qualitative research is going to be a little bit different. So basically coding, it's like assigning a tag to a specific section of text or a specific section of text. So we are going to do this practically, and we shall see how it's done. So we shall be dissecting specific maybe dissecting might be a complicated word. We shall be breaking down our text into small significant statements. So we get those statements that can actually help us answer our research questions and objectives. So you pick out those statements that are really important in relation to your research question and highlight them. So you break them down. So break those different sections of the text that you feel like are very important. Highlight them, highlight them, highlight them. And we're going to see how we are going to be using these to develop categories and themes. So we shall get to that point when it gets to coding. So from coding, then we shall categorize those codes in, we shall group those codes into what we shall be calling now categories. So we shall see which sections of the text that I broke or that I highlighted fit together, which are similar, and classify them into different categories. So we shall see how we are going to be doing this in the forthcoming slides. And after that, we shall go ahead and develop our themes. And here we shall be looking at the different relationships or patterns that are within those different categories that we have developed. So it is usually very good to confirm your findings from different data collection methods. Make sure that you try to compare the findings or the themes that you have developed from one type of data collection method with another. That's if you have different types of data collection methods. If you have different participants, try to compare the different findings that you have gotten from the different participants. So this is really a very important thing because it helps to enhance the trustworthiness of our study findings. And then also there's this step number 8. It's really a very important step. Why? Because we need to make sure that the findings that we have really reflect what the participants told us. So we need to take these themes or the findings now back to the participants to try and confirm or validate them. So that is really another critical step. So we need to take them back to the participants, and then they will confirm that, yeah, the themes that you have generated really reflect what we told you. So that is one of the important things that we need to put into consideration. And then lastly, when they verify or validate your findings, then you can go ahead and write your research findings. Okay, we can go to the next slide. Okay, so I put some tips on how to do effective transcribing. And one we've talked about already, the first point, which is clear documentation. How are you labeling your transcripts? So make sure you indicate those different details, the location, the time, the date. Really make sure you have clear documentation of your transcript. And also make sure when you're doing the transcribing, you're in a comfortable place. Don't go to maybe an outing place and you're like, I have my data, I'm here to start coding or to transcribe. Trust me, you will not get what you want. So it is always very good to make sure that you're in a very comfortable place, and you also have some bit of silence in the place so that you can be able to concentrate and transcribe your data. And then also you play when you're transcribing, because remember you have your audio on and then you're writing what you're hearing. So play a small section at a time as you're writing and type as you hear them. So don't put in your own words, type what you're hearing, because many times when you put in your own words, now you will get biased findings. And then from there, we also have, in case sometimes we might have an interview with someone, and maybe certain pieces of information are not very clear. Maybe the information they gave was not very detailed, but the entire paragraph can give a picture of what they're trying to communicate. So you can paraphrase that section and add in the content that you feel will make it very clear, but make sure to highlight that that content is not from the original source. So I gave an example in this point 4. This is an extract from one of the transcripts. So the participant said they have to buy, the participant basically said they have to buy, but someone would be asking themselves, what are they supposed to buy and who is supposed to buy? But when you read that data, it will tell you who the person they were referring to and what they're supposed to buy. You understand? So this participant, Sister Sanyu, said they have to buy. But you, as the researcher, you know that they were referring to mothers. So you can add in that section. Maybe you can add it in square brackets to show that it is your own words. So you know that they were referring to mothers. They have to buy. What are they supposed to buy? But you know they were referring to medicines and essential supplies. Add it there, but put it in brackets to show that it is your words, not from the original source. So highlight those sections that you have paraphrased. And then also we need to always separate the speakers, the different speakers when you're transcribing in paragraphs. So let's go to the next slide, please. Next slide, please. Yes, and then also for you to make sure that you have done a very good transcribing, or is make sure after you have completed the transcribing, listen to the audio at the same time while reading out your text. It will tell you where they do not colorate, and you can know where to modify or where to make better. So always after the transcribing, listen to your audio that you're transcribed, and also as you're reading out the transcription or the text that you have written. That can help you appreciate whether you have done a very good job with that transcribing. And then after all that, you can then check out for the spelling errors and the formattings and all those kind of things to make your transcript very clear. And then, like I said, for you to make sure that you have really made a good job with the transcribing, you need to give a different person your work to check the accuracy of the transcripts. And that is through them reading the transcript while listening to the audio. So they can help you make sure that your data is accurate. However, like I said, I prefer doing the transcribing myself because it helps me to get familiar with my data, and that helps in the coding. I prefer that. However, others might prefer the automatic aspect of transcribing. We have different softwares that can do the transcribing for you. However, I need to tell you that these softwares are not really that very efficient. So because of our different accents and tones, so they tend to give some wrong wording. So you need to really go back after using the software to try and rectify those different sections that are not accurate. So you can use different softwares. For example, we have InVivo. You know InVivo, though the problem is that it's also for buying, but it can help with the transcribing and the thematic analysis. You can use the Microsoft Word. It has that option of transcribing. You just go to dictate, and just underneath there is an option for transcribing. And within a second, it has transcribed the entire audio. So you just have to go back in and try to rectify those different sections that are not accurate. So the ball is in your hands, either to do a manual or an automatic transcribing. So let's go to the next slide, please. Like I said, after every step, take a break from the research. At least even if it's a day, take a break, take a cup of coffee, have some fun, come back the following morning with a fresh mind. So you have done a lot of transcribing, you have done a lot of checking here and there. After all that, take a break. Come back with a fresh mind, because I can tell you, your mental health is the most important thing. We've seen people really struggle with research. They find it very challenging, and this usually affects the research process. So always take a break. So then after that, we go to the next step, one of the most important steps, and that is coding. So by the end of this slide, I assume people will be able to code. So we are saying what is coding? I said we should not confuse this with the coding of IT, where they make those programming things. I don't know them, but there's that bit of coding. So, but our coding is a bit different. So our coding is more of identifying those significant statements in our text that really speak to our research question. So you identify that text that is going to help you answer your research question. So this means that before you start any coding process, you need to make sure you document somewhere your research questions and your research objectives. So you look for those specific segments of text within the transcripts that that can actually help you answer your research questions. So you're saying this coding basically, it's like one word or two that can help you describe a very long sentence or paragraph of text. For example, someone might be telling a story. Every time when I'm, for example, let me give an example of a story. Maybe someone might say, every morning, I wake up very early in the morning to go to school, and I have to walk maybe 5 to 6 kilometers to get to where I attend school. And when I get there, I don't usually get something to eat, maybe during break and lunch. So you feel like someone is telling you a story, but you can summarize all that into maybe one or two phrases. Someone might say, challenges with school. To summarize all those different things someone is going to tell you. They are waking up early, they're not getting something to eat, they're walking a long distance. So all that story they're telling you, you can summarize it in one word or two, like maybe challenges with attending school. Those are 3 words that are really summarizing what someone is actually telling me. So basically with coding, we're going to find a phrase, a very descriptive or a very interpretive phrase that can really try to explain in short terms a big chunk of text data. So I've given some 2 transcripts here as examples. So if we take a look at the one on the left, so there was a question. The interviewer asked, what do you think of the current strategies, the current strategies to prevent road traffic collisions and neurotrauma in your city or country? So basically, this person is trying to find out the opinion of this person, what they think about the strategies that the government has put in place. Is that okay? So basically, we are going to be looking out for any text that is speaking to the opinion of that person about what they think about the strategies to prevent the road traffic collisions. So with coding, colors or highlighting with different colors can be a very good way to try and bring out those different statements or segments of the text that we are going to be using as codes. For example, someone highlighted, this is someone's transcript, the participant was saying, so they highlighted different sections. For example, there's one in purple, they're saying, not being enforced properly. So, the government has instituted things like traffic rules and all that, but these are not being enforced properly. So this person thinks, their opinion is, these rules are not being enforced properly. So this is one of the things that can actually speak to what this person thinks about the strategies that they have been put to manage the road traffic collisions. So you can highlight that text and you can then give it a very good, succinct phrase that can really describe it. So in this section here, we have where there is codes, or what we are going to call those different phrases or units of meaning that are going to be describing the text. So this not being enforced properly, they coded it as lack of compliance. But you can say that this really speaks to the rules not being enforced. They went ahead and they said, so for example, there's the next one in green. They don't seem to be, these police officers, they don't, the government says, the person says that there don't seem to be enough traffic police to cover the many areas in the city where there is a lot of traffic. And I suppose what you could call accident-prone areas. So they're saying, if you paraphrase it in your mind, that maybe there are not enough traffic police so that can really enforce these rules. So the person coded it as lack of enforcement. You get? So you basically try to read your data and identify a specific phrase that can really try to describe your data. So maybe let's look at this example on the right. So they've coded the different sections according to color. So there's the first one in blue. So this person asked a question: what in this course has helped you the most? So they're trying to find this person's perspectives regarding maybe those things that are helping them excel well in a specific course. So this person gave their information in this transcript that you're seeing on the side of the response. So, and if we look at some of the codes that were given, the first statement states, I appreciate how much the instructor encouraged us to voice our opinions. This is really something very good, and it helped them the most. So encouraging them to voice their opinions. So the person coded it, found a phrase or a word that can really describe that, and they said, encouraging expression. So there are very many words, but you're summarizing them into only two words, which is going to be our code in this text. So they went ahead, they're saying, and to ask questions in class. So they're basically picking specific sections of that text and also finding a suitable word or phrase that can really describe it in shorthand or in short terms. So basically what we're trying to do is that we are breaking down a very big chunk of data into significant statements that are going to help us to answer our research question. So we shall see how we are going to put these different sections, or what we are going to call codes, together so as to come up with different categories that will result into our themes. So are we together up to that point?
Yeah.
Okay. So like I said.
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. So like I said, with coding, there's so many ways on how people can do coding. It's all about you as an individual to find the best way, on how you can really highlight and be able to visualize those significant statements within your data. So this person drew a table and they used color coding to identify the different sections of the text that are going to help them to answer the research objectives, to in coding. This person highlighted the text itself. There is another approach. You can just, let's go to the next slide and we see that approach. So there is another approach. So on the left, we have a transcript. And then on the right, we have organizing of those different codes that they have identified in the transcript. So here, what this means is, so different people can actually code the same transcript, but everyone can use a different color of the highlight. So one person used the blue highlight, another person used the yellow highlight. So different people can code the same document at the same time. So basically what you have to do is that give them the research questions, and then according to them, they will identify those key statements that they feel help them to answer the research questions. And then after that, they are going to categorize those different statements. So like when you come now to the table on the left, on the right, so it has unit of meaning, but actually these are basically the statements they identified from the text, and they're trying to group them according to a specific pattern, like we are going to see in categories. So, but the basic thing about coding is you identifying that significant statement that you feel speaks to your research question. If I am looking at maybe barriers to care, what are those statements within the transcript that speak to barriers? Identify those statements. And they can actually be your codes, or you can use a code to describe those statements. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, thank you so much. So like I said, coding, it's really a process, or it's really a step that really needs a lot of time. Why? Because we usually have a lot of data. And many a times for quality control, coding should be done multiple times and also by multiple people, because everyone has a different kind of opinion towards a specific text. So the way I see something might be different from the way how someone else sees something, because we all have different backgrounds. And we know that with qualitative research, me as a researcher, my insights can actually also help to inform the research process. So basically here, for quality control, let's get different opinions from people on, let them all come together and code a specific text. So it is something that should be done multiple times, and if possible, but by different people, because we know that everyone has a different interpretation of a specific text. And then also we need to make sure that our research questions really guide us when we are highlighting that important, all those important statements within our data. Others might actually choose to do this manually. Print out your transcript, then give it to different people, and then they'll start highlighting those different sections of the work that they feel speak to your research questions. It is okay to have as many codes or as many significant statements as possible, because we are going to be compressing this when it comes to categories and themes. And we know that some of these are going to be also deleted, others are going to be archived in the forthcoming stages. So, but what we have to know is that coding is all about identifying those significant statements that speak to your research question. After the coding, you can take a break as usual, and then come back to the next step. But at this point, I want us to practice some coding. So I'm going to give you a transcript. It's about 3 lines. Read it, generate at least 3 or 4 codes, and then we can share in the group, or someone we can share. So let's go to the next slide. So on this slide, I've presented this transcript here on the left. It is just about 3 lines. So you can code the first line, the second line, and the third line. So just find a statement that can really communicate what that sentence is really talking about. So let's take like 3 minutes to code this transcript. So you can write down your 2 or 3 codes that you feel communicate what is in this transcript, and then we can share together.